What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. I'm Arch Anthony, the creator of the Ratings Matter slider project. Over the first week of the game, I have created the version 1 of the slider set. It's not the final version. It's a pretty good start to kind of build off of. Things aren't perfect. I will talk about the things that aren't perfect as we go, but it's a pretty decent start. You might have to adjust some values to help your game because you play differently than I do. But we'll go over the settings. I will start with the league settings just because there's not very many changes, and then we'll go into the actual sliders. Really, the only big changes in the league settings are you can use whatever time you want for the. I haven't dialed this in perfectly yet. They might be on the low side. You also are going to want to play on either placement or classic passing. The reason for this is that revamped. I kind of liken it to the shot stick in the NBA 2K basketball games, where revamped, like the shot stick, you can be more accurate with bad players or less accurate with good players, depending on your player skill. Placement and classic passing use the player ratings in conjunction with the quarterback accuracy slider to determine if there's going to be a good throw or a bad throw. It's college football. We want to see bad throws happen. Not every quarterback throws a perfect ball every time. We want balls that sail. We want balls that go in the dirt. That's why we don't use. But we also want high-end quarterbacks that throw less of those balls and bad quarterbacks to throw more of those balls, so we don't want to use revamped to put that into the control of the user. The other changes to this are the wear and tear sliders. I spent basically 2 full days trying to work out a way to make these sliders work to get a realistic rotation where you're getting 2, maybe even 3 running backs getting the ball, receivers subbing in and out, defensive linemen subbing in and out. I just couldn't do it. These sliders are very touchy and finicky. If you raise these to make it so that like tackles and hit sticks are more damaging, which seems great because then you can get players down into like the 40s and the 50s and 40s, which is where the subbing out happens. That's great. The issue is that they can only heal 100, whatever this actually even means, like 100 points or 100% of their healing in a single game. So if they get too damaged, what happens is they just sub out and they stay subbed out because they can no longer heal. That happened multiple times. I had games where, depending on how high these were and how either low or high the recovery was, I had running backs subbing out in the second quarter of games and never coming back in. Obviously, that's not ideal. They weren't injured. They had 2 health bars left out of the 5 or 6 that you get at the start of the game. So obviously that isn't ideal. It's going to take some time, I think, to dial these in. There's a potential that the fatigue is just bugged and just in general, because you'll see where I have the fatigue setting. Yeah. I just think fatigue in general is bugged. The wear and tear sliders on top of that causes a lot of issues. Right now, we're not seeing the amount of substitutions that we would like to see out of a set. Last year, I think we had fatigue at like 85, and we were getting a pretty good rotation. If you raised it too much, you would start to get disappearing players. I think that's still kind of the case. I think you're probably safe going to 90 or 95, and you can maybe get 1 or 2 extra carries from the running back and the defensive lineman. But for right now, we're going to stick with 85 just to be on the safe side. The things that I have changed, though, on these are we lower the recovery down a lot. This way, towards the end of games, you do see players showing the signs of some wear and tear, which like negatively impacts their abilities and their attributes a little bit, just to make it so that fourth quarters there are tired players out there, so that the system is working sort of as intended on a game-to-game, play-to-play basis. You're just not seeing the subs that you probably should be seeing. And that's it for the league settings. I haven't messed too much with the sim stuff to know if the transfer number is right or not. I would assume, I'll go back into here. I would assume that the number is going to be somewhere between like 17 and 23. I think it starts you off at 20, so that seems pretty fair. And the chance, I would prefer to keep these equal just because I think giving the user an advantage in this situation is kind of unfair, assuming that they're currently impacted equally and fairly. But I would actually kind of assume, just reading the like online discourse, that you might want to lower these down to like 40. I think there are players that are maybe being that have the chance to transfer right now that maybe shouldn't. So if you lower these, maybe that chance lowers, and the players that maybe are more likely or more deserving, I guess, of transferring will be the ones that stay. But again, that's something that we haven't really looked at all. So right now we'll go into the actual gameplay sliders. And before we even get started on any of these, because you might look at especially the pass blocking slider and be like, whoa, that's way too low. I'm seeing way too many sacks as is. It's important that this slider gets recognized first. Over on Operation Sports, Barber and Matt 10 both posted about how lowering the roughing the passer slider massively negates the pass rush. It really, really slows it down to the point where if you have pass rush at 30 and pass blocking at 50, which before I knew this, during the testing, I had pass blocking up to like 80 and roughing the passer at 50, and I was still getting too many sacks. Even just at 50, you basically have all the time that you'd ever need to throw the ball on most plays. So we're lowering the pass, roughing the passer, lowering the pass blocking now. We might get to a situation, and I'll comment on sort of the issues that people are seeing so far, because I did release this set at the end of last week. So I've gotten a fair amount of feedback that maybe the pass rush is still a little too good, and that the computer rushing game in particular is a little underpowered. So we might adjust things, because I'm a little worried that this just negates aggression on the defense in general. So we might move this up to 35 or 40 and then see where we're at everywhere else. But that is, I'll comment more on that towards the end of the video. So just going off, just to start off, so quarterback accuracy is all the way down to 10. We want to see bad quarterbacks be bad. We also want to see elite quarterbacks still be elite. So we might end up raising this just a touch, because some of the early feedback is that quarterbacks on the computer teams are still a little too bad. I think user teams, you're going to want to keep this down 10, maybe even lower. You have to just play with it to see how you do, but it's pretty easy to get a very high completion percentage in this game, outside of drops and just like poor decision making. The amount of missed throws isn't where I would like it. I would like it to be a little bit more, but that's where we're at. Pass blocking, like I said, this setting is set in tandem with roughing the passer. So it's kind of like a balancing act, right? You lower the roughing the passer a little bit, then you also lower the passing blocking a little bit to try to get a balance of where you want it. This is where we're at right now. Again, this might change in a later version. We're still kind of dialing in that balance, but I wanted to get a version 1 out for the launch of the game. Wide receiver catching, it's at 38 again, the same as last year. It's important to note that the precipitation sliders, which we'll get to in a little bit, play a pretty major impact. If it's raining, you're going to see drops, right? We want to see drops in dry games, which makes it a little bit more difficult to dial in when it's a raining game, because you also want to see drops. And you wanted to see more drops than in the dry games. So yeah, we're still kind of dialing that in a little bit, but for right now, you should see drops. They are random. They're not going to be player rating based a total lot, but I think a lot of people have this misconception that Players just don't drop balls, and they do, right? Jeremiah Smith, one of his first plays in college was a drop against Akron last year. He also dropped a touchdown pass early in the season. He's the best receiver in the game. Players drop balls a lot in college. It's just something that happens. All right, watch any Georgia game last year. Watch any Notre Dame game last year. Those teams dropped a lot of balls. Should it be more ratings based? I would love for that to be the case. It's just not. It's sort of just like a percentage based roll of the dice kind of thing, I think, at the moment, where you lower this, you get more drops. You raise this, you get fewer drops. It doesn't seem to have anything to do based on the player ratings, which is unfortunate. Run blocking. Okay, this is a kind of a contentious issue with this set, is that I just think people have a misconception of what the running game should look like. Running the ball shouldn't be a guaranteed success. I think a lot of at base values, you can kind of get 3 yards a carry pretty easily, and not just as an average. I mean, as like a minimum, you can get 3 yards into the second level of the defense without getting touched most of the time. Obviously, of course, there are I don't want to say outlier, but there are a small percentage of plays that get blown up, and you have to break a tackle to get there. But for the most part, at base values, running the ball is a very safe, easy way to gain yards. In real life, that's not necessarily the case. Teams average, 3 to 5 yards a carry, but that's a lot of no yard carries, even some negative yard carries, and then you'll hit a big gainer for 12 to 15 yards to really bump up that average. That's kind of what we're trying to represent in this game. Obviously, teams like Notre Dame and Penn State should be running the ball more effectively and more like that traditional football experience, college football like video game experience. But for the average team, it should be more sporadic success. Right? It should just be, I'm going to run the ball 3 times to get a first down every time. That's not really how football works, right? The reason that Navy and Army run those crazy option offenses is because just lining up and running isn't going to succeed. They need to do some misdirection and things like that to try to get those yards. So we have this all the way down to 20 for the user because by default the run blocking is a little too easy. A user on the sticks can break a lot of tackles and get that yardage. It's also an issue in the game that, and it's been helped but not fixed since last year, is that the second level defenders don't activate on the ball soon enough. It's the reason that play action passes don't work as well as they should. Linebackers and safeties are pretty much committed to the pass until the very end. And there are maybe 30% of the plays where you run the ball and you're in the second level, you're meeting the linebackers at basically where they snap the ball at before they've even reacted to the fact that it's a run play. It was a huge issue last year. I would say it's a little bit better this year, but the reason that we're lowering run blocking so much is that we're trying to get the defensive linemen the ability to make the play before needing the linebacker to rely on it, just because the linebacker is so inconsistent. Is it the most realistic looking plays a lot of the times because the defensive linemen are winning more than they probably should? Yeah, but we're doing that to service the stats, right? We'd rather make the run game a little bit more difficult and give the computer a chance to defend you and make you force you to throw or force punts. I will say the only thing that's really been an issue so far with this is that in obvious running situations, running game is very hard. So at the goal line, I don't know if I've had a goal line touchdown yet. You get stuffed pretty well when they're actually all out trying to stop the run. Again, I mean, it's a tough balance to do right now, right? It's either you make the running game way too easy or you make it way too hard. And I would rather lean on the hard side and try to help a little bit here and there to try to balance that out versus leave the game too easy. Ball security, fumbles are pretty rare so far in the game as far as I've noticed. Obviously the reaching out mechanic is pretty impacts us a lot, so try not to do that unless you really have to. But right now we've lowered ball security all the way down to 30, and I think I've only seen one like true fumble that wasn't like a weird thing that happened that caused it to be a fumble. The pass defense I actually like out of the gate pretty well. There's a lot of good coverage out there, and then occasionally you'll see, a missed coverage, like just a blown coverage that allows for an easy touchdown. I like that. I want that to be something that happens in the game, right? That happens in college football a lot. Right, like I would rather have, for the average team, like not an elite defense, but like an average team, I'd rather have them play average to even slightly bad defense and then have the offense struggle to execute versus like great defense when the team shouldn't be playing great defense. And that's kind of where we're at right now, right? I have up pass coverage just a little bit, mainly to help with the underneath stuff. But I think the more teams focus on the underneath stuff, the more the over-the-top stuff opens up, which is natural and helps. An interesting change this year is that we're upping tackling across the board. We might end up, because of the computer running game struggling so much, we might end up lowering this a little bit to allow them the chance to maybe break some tackles, and maybe that will help with the stats. But for right now, we've raised the user tackling up to 60. Again, I just think it helps. Right, we'll get to this in a minute, but we've raised run blocking significantly for the computer, and then only raised tackling a little bit for the user. Again, it's a balance. I would rather, if we're going to make a change, I would rather lower this a little bit than raise this even more, because it's already at 80. Once you get up to like 90, especially, you start seeing some really funky things with the run blocking where they're pancake blocking all the time. And you still see that even at 20 for the user, but right, I'd rather see fewer short tackles and more loose broken tackles than crazy run blocking. But again, this for version 2, I'm going to do a lot of testing on the running game, because that seems to be the single biggest issue so far. Okay, then we can transition to the computer. Again, 10 QB accuracy. It doesn't seem, last year lowering QB accuracy below like 30 or 35 really seemed to impact the AI for the computer. They would just force a lot of like check down throws. They wouldn't try to force the ball into like bad coverages, which was good because interceptions were so crazy. So, but also it just led to a lot of bad offenses where they would just throw it 3 or 4 yards of play. I'm not saying that that's not an issue this year. It kind of still is, and we might end up raising this a little bit, but I don't think it's as big of a deal. All right, I played a game against Penn State, and I think it was set at 13 at the time, and Alar was still chucking it deep. He wasn't. I would say the computer felt a little less confident than they probably should have against me. I think I was playing as UCLA, and I almost won. I did lose the game, but I almost won, and it never felt like the offense was unstoppable against me, which it kind of probably should have based on their player ratings. So this might need raised a little bit, but I would rather, again, start a little low where the quarterbacks are a little more inaccurate than they should be, and then raise from there than leave the computers to be too strong throwing the ball. I just think even at 30 when I was playing, I was seeing pass completion percentages like over 80%, and that's obviously just not great. So yeah, we will continue to dial that in, but I think the biggest, and also to go on that pass blocking, we have right now at both at 39, user and computer. We might raise this a little bit. I just think the user is a little bit smarter at dealing with pass blocking, so giving the computer a little bit of help might be useful. Wide receiver catching is also at 38, same as the user. I haven't really noticed a discrepancy between the user and the computer in that sense as far as drops go. I think it's pretty fair across the board, so you can kind of keep them the same. Run blocking, we have this raised up to 80. Probably the single biggest piece of feedback over everybody's that they've given, and I've received quite a few, and I'm appreciative of all the people who have tried out the slider set, is that the computer still can't run the ball as much as they probably should be able to. So that is the biggest thing. Like I said earlier, I'd rather lower root user tackling or raise roughing the passer if that's going to impact things, and that's a test that I will probably run over the next couple days. Then continue to raise this. I think last year at some point we did have it up to like 90. Again, I wish there was I think in the old games there was a running back ability slider. I wish we could raise that instead. I want the running back to be more, willing to break tackles and willing to make plays than just up the run blocking continuously, because you can run into situations against teams with good lines that you just can't stop them if you race this too much. Right? It's a kind of a difficult balance to make, which is, should be the name of this set, a difficult balance. Because I feel like I'm saying that a lot. Again, ball security is down to 30. We're not really seeing fumbles yet that I would think are too crazy, so we might end up lowering this even more. I don't know. As of right, I'm kind of happy with the amount of fumbles. I don't want to see, 2 or 3 fumbles a game. Obviously, that does happen occasionally, but I think you can kind of get out of hand pretty quickly if you just keep lowering this. Same thing with the past sliders. There actually was an issue, a error with my initial post, and I just edited them before I came online here. I had interceptions at 40 for the computer by mistake. They should have been 30 for both. I want to see dropped interceptions. I do love that the interceptions are more natural this year, where the computers aren't just going to, jump 10 feet in the air, Willie Mays style, and get a pick. That being said, there are still a few more interceptions than there probably should be. And mostly that's because the defenders don't seem to ever drop a ball. So lowering those helps them make that change, but they will drop an occasional interception. And maybe even lowering this, and a side benefit will be that they try to deflect more than they actually try to intercept. I haven't played enough really to notice that, but hopefully that is a change that happens. And again, we have tackling at 65 for the computer. That helps versus the 60 for the user, just because the user is better at breaking tackles. So we give the computer a little bit of a bonus towards that. We might raise this a little bit more. I don't mind that the user running game is at where it's at right now. I have seen some people having a little bit too much success. So again, we might raise that a little bit, or I might just say, hey, if you're running the ball too much, raise this. I haven't really seen an issue with it so far. I had one game where I was kind of I was able to do whatever I wanted. But again, a 1 game sample size, I'm not going to change a set on that. And then, special teams is a big one. Once again, it doesn't seem that the computer is affected by these at all. I was seeing kickers make 59-yarders, and they weren't barely making it. They were probably going to be good from 70 if they attempted it. So I have these set where they're at. I have kickoff power at 100 just in case I forget to sim a kick that I'm kicking. I can easily kick it out of the back of the end zone for a touchback, but otherwise I'm super simming all special teams plays. I will say it is a little frustrating this year because teams are more likely to go for it on 4th down. So sometimes I will start the super sim thinking that it's going to be a field goal attempt, and then it turns out that either my team or the other team was going for it, and I wasn't ready for that. So make sure you're checking the play that's going to be happening next, because you can see what the computer is going to try to do. At least in that case, that'll help you there. The user sometimes just decides to go for it whenever you're super simming, and you can't really do anything about it. But yeah, I would rather take a few plays every once in a while that don't go the way that you want them to, versus having the computer make super kicks all the time. Okay, and then injuries and fatigue. Like I said earlier, fatigue seems to be pretty bugged. Even at 90 fatigue, I'm only seeing the backups get 2 or 3 carries a game. At 100, I was seeing a similar rotation, except for at the end of the game, the starters would the starting running back would end up subbing out. Right? It's like he's not subbing out enough during the course of the game, and then he ends up getting way too tired at the end, and then disappears. I don't know. I feel like they have sort of shifted the rotation priority to be based more on wear and tear than fatigue, and because the wear and tear stuff isn't working, at least as like intended, I think like it doesn't make common sense, at least how the wear and tear stuff is set up, that it's causing some issues with the rotation. If they end up either fixing the wear and tear stuff to work better, or going back to making the fatigue work like it did last year, we'll set this back to 85. And I think if they do that, it would be an ideal situation for at least me, I think, because then I would set the wear and tear stuff to be super low impact and then also super, super, super low recovery, and turn that wear and tear mechanic into more of a season and a career mechanic versus trying to worry about trying to get a realistic rotation on based on them. I think that's kind of how I would hope they manage it going forward. I like the idea of having a wear and tear based rotations, but I also think that fatigue is the more realistic and more like important thing to get right. Speed threshold, this is higher than we've had it before. What I think it does in it helps with a few different things. It makes speed not be the single most valuable attribute by far in the game. High 90 speed players are still going to be faster and better than low 90, high 80 speed players. But it's going to give those players, if they have high acceleration or change of direction or things like that, it's going to give them a chance against those high speed players. It also kind of potentially helps with the offensive line because they have much slower speeds than the defensive linemen, so it kind of minimizes that gap a little bit. Last year, and I haven't noticed this so much this year, but last year it seemed like raising the threshold increased sort of like the zone of contact around a player. So the higher the threshold, the more difficult running through the center was because players could initiate tackles from a little bit further away. And if you put it at 0, basically a player had to be like hugging a player to initiate the tackle. Again, that doesn't seem to be as big of a thing this year from what I've just noticed, but again, I would rather slow down the interior running game a little bit. Based on what I'm seeing and people have been reporting about the running game, I might end up lowering this down to like 90, maybe 85. Again, that's going to be determined based on what I can do with the other running related sliders. I kind of like having it 95. I like how it feels overall compared to last year. I think we had it at 57 last year. I think I tried a few games with like an 80-ish threshold, and I just didn't like how it felt. I like how this feels. This year, it's just if that's going to impact things outside of just flat speed, then I want to make sure that the other things that are impacting are fixed before we settle for sure on a threshold. So again, this might drop down to like 90 or 85 or somewhere in between. But for right now, that's where we have it, 95. Okay, and then precipitation this year is a huge deal. The rain really changes things. Actually, my first game, I was like super happy because I tried to throw a deep ball and the ball only went with a bad quarterback, and the deep ball only went like 40 yards. And I was like, holy crap, they fixed throwing power so you don't just have infinite power all the time. Well, they didn't. Turns out in the rain, you do have limited power. You can't throw super long deep balls, but in the dry, you still can. So what we've done is we've just lowered all of the percentages down from 50 to 30. It makes it so that rain still has an impact, but it's not like completely game changing. Part of the reason for this is that a lot of these changes impact the offense more than the defense. Obviously, broken tackle doesn't, but a lot of these impact the offense more than the defense. And actually, I mean, if you look at spreads and stuff like that, the better offensive teams usually actually benefit from the rain because just think about it like running a route. Like the receiver knows where they're going to try to break and run, and they can anticipate that a little better. The defender is all reactive, so being able to, cut in the rain when you know where you're going versus when you don't know where you're going, it's going to benefit the offense a little bit. Obviously, catching should be impacted a little bit. That might be too high. We might lower that to 20 because right now there are a lot of drops in the rain. But everything else I'm kind of liking. There's a little bit of an impact, but it's not crazy. Right? It's not like a different game when you're playing in the rain. It's just a little bit better. We've kept movement, I think, at 40 just because that is sort of the biggest thing that changes, especially because this also impacts snow games. I haven't actually played a snow game yet, but in the snow, you do want to see players going a little bit slower, falling over, not being as fast, not being able to change direction as much. So we kept this at 40 versus the 30 for the rest of them. Penalties, I went into this year trying to just base the penalties solely off of getting penalties called accurately, not worrying about how they impact gaming. I wanted to make the penalties work first and then base the sliders around that. Obviously, that wasn't completely possible because a few of the penalties are just bugged and won't ever get called and get called correctly, and also B, the effects that the penalties create on the gameplay is pretty severe. There was a pretty big argument or discussion in the thread last year about people not believing that penalties actually impact gameplay. If you just try roughing the passer, keep everything else at default and just lower roughing the passer, you'll see a huge difference in pass blocking. I think it's clear as day. I don't think you can make the argument that it does anything else. Right? The rationale behind this, right, is that the more you raise roughing the passer, the defense gets more aggressive, the trade-off being that they can get called for pass interference. If you lower rough of the passer, the defense won't ever get called for it, but they also are more passive and won't risk trying to get a pass interference, roughing the passer call. And that rationale and that sort of theory where if you lower it, the behavior that would lead to it also gets lowered. Sometimes that applies and sometimes it's the opposite. I wish it was more consistent. But right now, this is also according to Matt 10. I think last year it was different because my rationale was the opposite last year, right? I had face mask at super high because I wanted wrap-up tackles instead of big hits. And I would classify a face mask related tackle as a wrap-up tackle. This year, I'm basing this off of Matt 10's rationale and thinking. I had it at 85 and I changed it to 35, and I'll be honest, I haven't really seen much of a difference, but he wanted to see less big hits, more wrap-up tackles, so he lowered his. I wanted the same thing, so I lowered mine as well. I will say I haven't seen as many big hits, but it was also in conjunction with lowering the roughing the passer and changing the tackling settings, so it might not be solely based on the face mask change, but we're keeping it low because face mask never gets called, so you might as well use it to try to impact the gameplay. Offsides and false starts are only ever called in big stadiums where the crowd is causing an impact and when you fake snap. I've sort of been maybe thinking about changing these pretty substantially to try to see if they impact gameplay at all, right? Because the thinking is offsides, maybe that'll impact, again, aggressiveness, like the roughing the passer slider. So maybe if you lower this significantly, they'll be even less aggressive, or maybe they'll be super aggressive. Same with false start. Maybe the false start will impact how aggressive an offensive line is off the jump. Again, I haven't actually tested these. I just left these at 60. I had this up super high at one point, but a user who does a lot of audibling was complaining that I shouldn't say complaining. They were noticing that they were getting called for a lot of false starts. So I lowered this, again, because I'm not seeing any benefit or, impact of having it set at one thing or the other. Holding, I haven't seen a huge gameplay impact. I'm kind of just trying to get the number to be, 2 or 3 holdings a game, maybe a little bit more. What I don't want is situations where you're in 2nd and 30 or 3rd and 30, which was kind of the case last year if you race this too much. I had this set, I think, at 70, and I was starting to, I saw one of those situations, which again, it happens in real life occasionally, but again, we shouldn't see it in the game in a super small sample size, which is what happened. So we lowered this down to 66. This might get raised a little bit if I'm not seeing enough over the course of me playing more. But for right now, 66 seems to be fine. You're not seeing them every play. You're not seeing them every other play. Again, you might see 2 or 3 a game. I would like to see a little bit more, but I would like to see them spread out over a full game and not, front-loaded into a single drive. We already talked about face mask. We're lowering that. Defensive pass interference. Again, there's no actual pass interference animations in the game. They took those out. They added those in Madden 17 or whatever, and then they were super cheesy, so they removed them. You can get pass interference calls. I've had more pass interference calls in this game than I've ever had in a previous college football game, but there's no actual animation, so the defender will just bump into the receiver in a weird way, and the penalty would get called. Because that's not really based on the slider, I don't think. It's just kind of a random thing that happens. We're not going to max this out, and instead we're going to put this at 75. The thinking is that the more you raise this, the more space that the defender is going to give. Again, it's kind of opposite rationale than this one, so maybe we end up flipping this to 25. But for right now, I'm seeing pretty good results at 75. Versus we had it at 70, and I think at 75 the coverage is a little bit tighter. The defenders are more likely to be, connected to the receiver going through the ball. Again, they should be more likely to get called for pass interference, but there's just no animations for that. That being said, I did have one play where there was a sort of pass interference animation, which definitely didn't happen last year at all. It was more just the defender kind of just tackled the receiver because he was getting beat, which is perfect. I would love to see that more, but I think it was just a weird thing where the defender thought the player had the ball, so he tackled him, and he got called. He did get called for pass interference correctly, but again, that only happened one time in testing. So we're gonna leave that at 75. Depending on how the pass coverage plays, we might change that a little bit here or there. We're keeping all of these ones that are just on and offs on for right now. I know last year, roughing the kicker and running into the kicker was kind of bugged, so we set those off. And I think they did help gameplay a little bit. But for right now, we're just kind of building on the fact that they're on. And then finally, again, roughing the passer all the way down to 30 really helps with the pass rush. It's kind of like a game-changing sort of slider. Again, shout out to Yabarber and Matt 10 for noticing that. Okay, so the issues that are currently going on with the set are primarily the computer running game, and also secondarily to that, the user running game being too good. The computer, obviously, the issue is that they're not good enough. That's obviously not great from a fix standpoint, right? Because I would love to say, oh, well, the computer run game's not as good. Maybe that is very clearly an issue with the fact that we have this all the way down to 30. So what if we set this to 40, raise pass blocking up to 45 or 50 for both teams to balance that out, and then bam, maybe that also helps the computer run game, because the defense will be a little bit better, and we can hopefully get the run game to be, at least that would help the user run game to be a little bit worse, and then we could balance the computer from there. I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think realistically what we're going to end up doing is raising tackling for the computer to 70, maybe lowering tackling for the user to 55, 50, and then also lowering run blocking a little bit more, because I still am seeing some pretty crazy good run blocking even at 20. I think that will really, really hurt the goal line offense though for the user, because right now it's really tough already. But I think it might be what is needed to help because I don't want to see like a ton of like over 200-yard rushing games, which I am seeing some box scores of that from users who aren't using like Notre Dame or Penn State, right? If you're using those kind of teams against bad teams, you're going to see those numbers because in real life, coaches, A, they'll sub out players when they're winning by that much, and B, they kind of just don't, right? They're not trying to kill the bad teams, right? They're just trying to, beat them and get the games over with. Versus a user who's like not hurrying, not chewing the clock, just trying to really kill a team. You can mess up the box scores a little bit by doing that kind of stuff, but for right now, that is where the version 1 of this slider set is at. I will be playing over the next couple weeks. Hopefully there's a patch that comes out soon that helps some of the dynasty issues and also hopefully fixes the fatigue or the wear and tear to a point where we can get a solid rotation going. Any really other gameplay fixes from there would be appreciated, especially balancing out the run game, but I'm not really expecting those. So I think the slider set, barring any like unintended changes, which happened a few times last year, where random patches just kind of changed how the game played in a weird way without ever being addressed by EA. Outside of that side of thing, I don't think there should be major changes to the slider set going forward. I will, if I can get the computer run game to be fixed, and or I figure out a pass blocking combination here that works pretty perfectly in my eyes, I will obviously update the set, and I'll try to post a video here as well as an update. But this is sort of meant to be used as like a foundation for you, right? Like this is sort of the base set based on my rationale, based on my philosophy of how I want the game to play, and then you can take that and run with it and try to adjust things based on how you want them to play. Last year I made an XP slider set. I will be trying to do that as well. That takes a lot of time, so that'll be coming in maybe a few weeks, maybe a month. It'll also kind of depend on if they fix things on the Dynasty side, because this will be maybe a longer video, but there are some things, especially with the way that recruits are currently being generated, that I am a little worried about. Mainly strong safeties. If you go into the strong safety recruiting, I've tested out a few different dynasties just while testing gameplay sliders, and I have not seen a single 5-star strong safety, and I've only seen like 8 a year, 4 stars. So I think strong safeties are going to be pretty weak in the game, coupled with the fact that you can no longer just change free safeties to strong safeties without seeing the massive skill cap issues for changing positions. I think that's going to be a pretty tough thing for especially the computer teams to manage, because only like 8 teams a year are going to get strong safeties that are like Power 5 championship caliber players, and that's assuming that none of them are busts. That's going to be an issue. I think offensive line is also kind of a lot weaker than last year, right? I think last year's XP slider set, I had all of the offensive line values down to like 0 or like 25 or something, like super, super low. I think this year is going to be the opposite, where we're boosting the offensive lines because their recruits are pretty bad across the board. A lot of wide receiver and corners are usually 5-star rated, which is fair. I think that is kind of the way that recruiting is going. It's just that 4 stars should be pretty evenly distributed, or at least closer to evenly distributed, and that's not happening right now. Anyway, that was sort of a tangent, not related to this actual slider set, but that'll be probably the next video, hopefully, is that, the gameplay, we get the gameplay dialed in. That'll be version 2. That'll be probably the next video that's posted, and then I'll start working like quote unquote full time in my off time to work on the XP slider set. Sorry if you heard that. My cat is zooming. But we will wrap up today there. That is a 45-minute video for you, all talking about this slider set. And I hope that it works out for you. We will obviously keep working on this. Obviously, feel free to leave any comments, feedback. I will also post a link to the Discord channel that the set is that's being used for the set, and I will link to the Operation Sports thread. Any updates will probably be posted there sooner, just because I can't always just hop on and record a video. I can it's much easier for me to just post a written update. But yeah, that's where we're at. Thank you for watching, and have fun playing.